The diplomatic chamber aboard the Veranthi science vessel hummed with what I can only describe as the intergalactic equivalent of awkward silence. I am Kelthuris, senior xenobiologist for the Veranthi Concordance, and I have spent the last 3 cycles studying the bizarre species that calls itself humanity. 3 cycles, and I still cannot decide if they are brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. My colleague Miran tapped her sensory appendages against the observation console, producing a rhythmic clicking that meant she was either nervous or about to say something I would not want to hear. Given our current situation, I suspected both. Kelthuris, she began, her voice carrying that particular tone that always preceded disaster. The humans are asking to see the quantum stabilizer again. I felt my primary stomach twist. No. They said please. Absolutely not. They said please twice. I turned from the viewport where I had been watching Earth rotate below us, that irritating blue marble that had caused me more professional headaches than the previous 40 stellar years combined. Miran, the last time we showed them our quantum stabilizer, they somehow managed to break it by asking questions. Questions, Miran. They literally broke advanced technology with verbal inquiry. She made that whistling sound that passed for Veranthi laughter. That was impressive though, you have to admit. Impressive was one word for it. Catastrophic was another. Expensive was a third. The Concordance High Council had sent me a very pointed message about that particular incident, complete with repair invoices and several strongly worded paragraphs about proper security protocols. The door panel chimed. Before I could deny entry, it slid open anyway because of course the humans had already figured out how to override our door controls. They had been on the ship for exactly 14 solar hours. Marcus Stone walked in first, and I immediately recognized the expression on his face. It was the same expression he wore right before explaining why something we considered impossible was actually quite simple once you understood the underlying principles. His companion, a woman named Kira Vance, followed close behind, carrying what appeared to be a portable computing device and an expression of barely contained excitement. Kelthuris, my favorite extraterrestrial colleague. Marcus announced, spreading his arms wide in that theatrical human gesture. We have been thinking about your little problem with the gravitational dampeners. We do not have a problem with the dampeners, I said carefully. Oh sure, if you do not count the way they destabilize every 48 hours and require a full system reboot, Kira interjected, already pulling up holographic displays from her device. Which, you know, seems like a problem to me, but what do I know? I am just a mechanical engineer from Cleveland. I had learned that humans often stated their credentials immediately before proving them spectacularly correct about something. It was a rhetorical device that drove me to distraction. The dampeners function within acceptable parameters, Miran said, but her sensory appendages had stopped clicking, which meant even she was curious. Marcus pulled out a chair and spun it around, sitting backwards on it in that distinctly human way that suggested he was about to deliver bad news disguised as helpful advice. Acceptable is such a sad word, do you not think? It is like saying your spaceship flies adequately, or your coffee is drinkable, or your existence is tolerable. I like my existence, I muttered. See, that is the spirit. He grinned, which showed far too many teeth for my comfort. Humans had an alarming number of teeth. Now, Kira and I spent the morning reviewing your technical specifications, and we noticed something fascinating. You cannot access our technical specifications, I said. They are encrypted behind 7-layer quantum protection. Were, Kira corrected cheerfully. Past tense. Were encrypted. Also, your quantum protection uses a randomization algorithm based on prime numbers, which is adorable but not super effective once you realize the pattern repeats every 17,000 iterations. My secondary stomach joined my primary stomach in twisting. That is classified information. Was classified, Marcus said, holding up a finger. Now it is just information. Information that, frankly, explains a lot about why half your systems barely work. Our systems work perfectly. I protested, even though the gravitational dampener in Section 7 had failed twice that morning, and I had spent an hour rerouting power conduits just to keep life support stable. Mirren's sensory appendages started clicking again. Double time. Perhaps we should hear what they have to say. I glared at her, but she had that look that meant she was already convinced. Humans had infected her with their ridiculous optimism. Kira's holographic display bloomed into a three-dimensional schematic of our entire dampener network. Right, so here is the thing. Your gravitational dampeners are not actually failing. They are compensating. Compensating for what? I asked, despite my better judgment. For the fact that your entire power distribution system is routed through a central nexus that creates a standing wave interference pattern every time the ship changes velocity above 0.37 stellar units per hour. She said this as if it were obvious, which it absolutely was not. Marcus stood up, because apparently sitting backwards in a chair was only sufficient for opening statements, not detailed explanations. Think of it like this. You have a garden hose, right? Full water pressure, everything is great. But then someone puts their thumb partially over the end, and suddenly you have got irregular spray, pressure drops, the whole system goes wonky. That is what your power nexus is doing. It is a thumb on your garden hose. We do not have gardens on Veranthi Prime, I said weakly. Or hoses. Not the point, Keltherus, not the point at all. Marcus began pacing, which was another bad sign. Humans paced when they were excited about ideas. The point is, you built a ship with incredible technology, genuinely impressive stuff, but then you put in this weird bottleneck that makes no sense unless. He paused dramatically. Humans love dramatic pauses. Unless you were designing for a completely different power system originally and retrofitted this one later. The silence that followed was profound. Mirren's appendages stopped clicking entirely. I felt what humans would call a sinking feeling, except it was happening in all four of my stomachs simultaneously. How, I managed, could you possibly know that? Kira grinned, and I realized I was now seeing too many human teeth at once, which was overwhelming. Because we did the exact same thing with our first fusion reactors. We designed them for deuterium-tritium reactions, then tried to adapt them for pure deuterium when tritium got expensive, and everything went sideways until we rebuilt the magnetic confinement systems from scratch. This right here. She gestured at the hologram. This is textbook retrofit failure. I literally wrote a paper about this pattern in grad school. It won the departmental award, Marcus added proudly. It did. It absolutely did win the award. Kira looked unreasonably pleased about this. I exchanged a look with Mirren. The truth was, the Veranthi Concordance had indeed retrofitted our vessels 80 cycles ago when our primary power sources became economically unfeasible. The retrofit had been declared a success. Ships flew, systems functioned within acceptable parameters, and we had all moved on with our lives. Acceptable parameters. That word again. Even if what you say is true, I began carefully, the cost of redesigning our entire fleet's power distribution network would be astronomical. We are talking about thousands of vessels. The Concordance would never approve such an expenditure. Marcus and Kira looked at each other with identical expressions of mischief. Who said anything about redesigning? Marcus asked. Kira's fingers danced across her device, and the hologram shifted, displaying a new configuration that looked simultaneously simpler and more complex than the original. You do not need to redesign. You need to add bypass channels here, here, and here. Then you reroute the standing wave interference back through the dampeners themselves, turning the bug into a feature. The dampeners use the excess energy to stabilize themselves. Self-correcting system. Problem solved. That would require modifying the dampeners, Mirren said slowly. 3 modifications per dampener unit, Kira confirmed. Marcus and I worked out the specs. Standard tools, basic components you already have in your fabrication bays. The whole modification takes maybe 2 hours per unit if you know what you are doing. Which we do, Marcus added. Because we did it to fix the heating system in Section C this morning. Took 90 minutes. Your crew in that section is very grateful, by the way. Apparently it has been cold there for 6 months. My primary heart skipped several beats. You modified our ship without authorization. We asked the maintenance coordinator, Kira protested. Big guy, 4 arms, seemed very enthusiastic. Threxin does not have authorization to approve modifications. I practically shouted. Well, he definitely should, because he was super helpful and also made us these amazing pastries that tasted like cinnamon but better, Marcus said. Are Veranthi pastries normally that good, or is Threxin just exceptionally talented? Threxin is a maintenance technician, not a pastry chef. He is both now, Kira said. Honestly, talk about wasted potential. That guy should open a bakery. I pressed my primary manipulation appendage against my forehead, which was the Veranthi equivalent of a headache gesture that I had unfortunately picked up from watching too many human broadcasts. You broke into our systems, modified our ship without proper authorization, and discovered our maintenance technician's secret baking hobby in less than 1 standard day. Is that a record? Marcus asked Kira. I think our personal best was the Kilrathi trade station in 4 hours, but that barely counts because they practically begged us to fix their air filtration system. True, true. The smell was unbearable. Gentlemen, I said, then corrected myself because Kira was glaring at me. Humans, you cannot simply modify alien technology because you think you understand it better than the species that built it. But we do understand it better, Marcus said, and there was no arrogance in his voice, just simple, infuriating certainty. Kelthuris, your people are incredible scientists. Your theoretical knowledge is centuries ahead of ours. But you know what humans are really, genuinely, spectacularly good at? Causing problems? I suggested. Well, yes, but that is not where I was going with this, he admitted. We are good at fixing things that are broken. Not because we are smarter than you, but because we break so much stuff that we have gotten really, really experienced at putting it back together. Usually better than it was before. Kira nodded enthusiastically. Our entire industrial revolution was basically just us breaking things and figuring out improvements while we fixed them. Trial and error on a planetary scale. It was messy and dangerous and probably set us back a few decades, but we learned things you cannot find in textbooks. Your species sounds exhausting, I said. You have no idea, they both replied in perfect unison, then laughed. The console beside Mirren chimed with an incoming priority message. She activated it, and Captain Voldrin's face appeared, looking even more stressed than usual. Given that Voldrin's baseline state was mildly panicked, this was concerning. Kelthuris, we have a situation in the primary engineering bay. The humans. They. He paused, searching for words. They fixed the reactor stabilization system that has been problematic for 3 cycles, and now it is running at 107% efficiency, which should be impossible. Marcus leaned toward the screen. Oh hey Captain. Yeah, that was my fault. Sorry about that. Noticed you had some harmonic resonance issues in the plasma containment field, so we just tweaked the magnetic field geometry a bit. Should see about a 15% improvement in overall power output. You are welcome. Voldrin stared at him. Then at me. Then back at Marcus. How did you access the reactor core? That requires 5 separate security authorizations and a neural pattern scan. Does it? Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Ha. That would have been good to know. Anyway, the reactor is fine. Better than fine. Amazing, really. You could probably push it to 110% if you adjusted the coolant flow rate, but I did not want to be presumptuous. The communication cut out abruptly. I suspected Voldrin was having some sort of cardiovascular episode. I looked at Marcus and Kira, these 2 humans who had boarded our vessel less than 1 day ago and had already improved systems we had simply learned to work around, and I finally understood something fundamental about their species. They did not study failure to understand why things did not work. They studied failure to learn how to make it work anyway. And that, I realized with growing horror and fascination, was absolutely terrifying. So, Kira said brightly, about those quantum stabilizers you did not want us to look at. No, I said firmly. We could probably fix them. Absolutely not. Make them run better than factory specifications. I said no. Marcus pulled out another chair and gestured for me to sit. Kelthuris, my nervous friend, let me tell you a story about the first time humans tried to build a space elevator. Despite every instinct screaming at me to refuse, I sat down. Because deep down, I knew I was going to let them do it. I was going to let them tear apart our quantum stabilizers and probably improve them beyond recognition, and the Concordance High Council was going to send me another strongly worded message, and I was probably going to get demoted. But Section C was warm for the first time in months, and our reactor was running better than it ever had, and somewhere on this ship, a maintenance technician was baking pastries that apparently transcended species barriers. Sometimes, I thought as Marcus began his story with characteristic enthusiasm, acceptable parameters are just another way of saying we got used to things being broken. Humans, it seemed, had never learned to accept that. 3 days later, I found myself standing in what used to be our primary quantum stabilizer chamber, watching Marcus and Kira dismantle equipment that cost more than some planetary economies while humming what they claimed was classical Earth music. The humming was off-key. Both of them were humming different songs. It was driving me absolutely insane. You know what I love about Veranthi engineering? Marcus said, carefully extracting a crystalline component that pulsed with barely contained energy. You guys build everything like it is supposed to last forever. Which is great. Very sustainable. But also, you make it really hard to do routine maintenance. It is not supposed to require routine maintenance, I said for the 17th time that morning. The quantum stabilizers are self-regulating. Self-regulating within parameters that cause a 3% degradation annually, Kira countered, not looking up from her scanner. Which you compensate for by increasing power input, which creates more heat, which accelerates degradation, which requires more power. It is a death spiral in slow motion. Mirren, who had appointed herself as the Human Supervision Committee of One, clicked her appendages thoughtfully. How long until catastrophic failure at current rates? About 40 cycles, Kira said. Give or take 5 cycles depending on usage patterns. I felt my stomachs drop again. They had been doing that a lot lately. That information is classified at the highest levels of the concordance. Was classified, Marcus said cheerfully, because apparently that was becoming his favorite phrase. Also, maybe you should worry less about classification and more about the fact that your entire fleet's quantum communication network is going to fail within your lifetime. Just a thought. A helpful thought, Kira added. Very helpful, Marcus agreed. They had developed this pattern of finishing each other's sentences that I found both impressive and irritating. Apparently, working in close proximity under pressure had turned them into some sort of two-headed problem-solving entity. Captain Voldrin's voice crackled through the communication system. Kelthuris, please report to the bridge immediately. We have a situation. Is it the humans? I asked wearily. No, surprisingly. It is actually a distress call from a Confederation mining outpost in the Tertius sector. They are reporting complete systems failure. I exchanged glances with Mirren. The Tertius sector was 3 days away at maximum velocity, and the Confederation was not exactly friendly with the Concordance. Helping them would be politically complicated. What kind of systems failure? I asked. Life support, gravity control, and communications. They managed to get one emergency beacon out before everything went dark. Estimated crew of 200. Marcus had stopped humming. His expression had shifted from playful to intensely focused in a way that reminded me that humans, for all their chaos, took survival very seriously. How long can they survive with life support down? Unknown, Voldrin replied. Confederation mining outposts are notoriously poorly maintained. Could be hours, could be days. We need to go, Marcus said simply. We? I repeated. This is not your concern. You are here as observers and technical consultants, not rescue personnel. Kira was already packing up her equipment. Kelthuris, listen to me very carefully. If there are 200 people dying on that station, and we have the ability to help, then it absolutely is our concern. That is not politics. That is just basic decency. The Concordance has protocols for these situations, I began. Does your protocol involve letting people suffocate while you fill out paperwork? Marcus asked, and his voice had gone cold in a way I had never heard before. Because if it does, your protocol is garbage and you should feel bad about it. Mirren's appendages were clicking rapidly. He has a point, Kelthuris. Whatever our political differences with the Confederation, leaving sentience to die when we can prevent it violates our most fundamental ethical principles. I knew she was right. I also knew that responding to this crisis would create a diplomatic nightmare that would make the quantum stabilizer incident look like a minor accounting error. But looking at Marcus and Kira, seeing the absolute certainty in their eyes that saving lives was more important than anything else, I made a decision that would probably end my career. Captain Voldrin, set course for the Tertius sector. Maximum velocity. And prepare a rescue team. Acknowledged. We will arrive in 2.7 solar days. Not good enough, Marcus said. He turned to me with that expression that I had learned meant he was about to suggest something impossible. Your gravitational dampeners are running at optimal efficiency now, right? Yes, thanks to your modifications. And your reactor is outputting 15% more power than before. Closer to 17% now, but yes. And your inertial compensators were designed for a ship 20% larger than this one because you reused components from decommissioned heavy cruisers? I stared at him. How could you possibly know that? Because I spent yesterday evening reading through your maintenance logs while eating Threxon's pastries. The guy makes these things with a fruit that tastes like strawberries mixed with lightning. Life-changing. Anyway, my point is, you can push this ship a lot harder than you think. Kira was nodding enthusiastically. If we reroute auxiliary power through the upgraded dampener network and reconfigure the inertial compensators to handle higher stress loads, we could probably hit 0.9 stellar units per hour. Maybe even 0.95. That would tear the ship apart, I said flatly. Only if the compensators fail, Marcus countered. Which they will not, because we are going to optimize them. Give us 6 hours. You need 6 hours to redesign systems that took our best engineers 3 cycles to develop. No, we need 6 hours to fix the mistakes your best engineers made 3 cycles ago. There is a difference. Mirren looked at me. I looked at her. We both knew what we were thinking. These humans were going to get us all killed or promoted, and at this point, it was impossible to tell which was more likely. Do it, I said. But if we die, I am blaming both of you in my final log entry. Fair, Marcus said. 6 hours later, I stood on the bridge watching our velocity climb past 0.8 stellar units per hour, then 0.85, then 0.9. The ship was shaking slightly, but everything held. Marcus and Kira had spent those 6 hours doing things to our inertial compensators that I still did not fully understand, but the results were undeniable. We were moving faster than any Veranthi vessel had ever moved before. Structural integrity holding at 97%, Mirren reported, her voice tight with stress. Compensators operating within acceptable parameters, I added, then paused. Wait. Within optimal parameters. Not acceptable. Optimal. Marcus grinned from his position at the engineering console, where he had somehow convinced Captain Voldrin to let him monitor systems. Getting the hang of it, are you? Arrival at Confederation mining outpost in 14 hours, Voldrin announced. Kelthuris, what is your plan once we arrive? That was an excellent question. I had been so focused on getting there quickly that I had not actually thought through the rescue operation itself. We need to determine the cause of their system's failure before we can fix it, I said carefully. Already on it, Kira said, pulling up sensor data. I am analyzing the emergency beacon transmission. There is some interesting data embedded in the carrier wave. Looks like they had a cascading power failure that started in their main reactor and spread through their entire grid in under 30 seconds. 30 seconds? Mirren's appendages went still. That should be impossible. Safety protocols alone should take longer than that to disengage. Unless someone overrode the safety protocols, Marcus said quietly. Or something bypassed them entirely. The bridge went silent. You think this was sabotage? Voldrin asked. I think it is suspicious, Marcus replied. Mining outposts have redundant systems specifically to prevent this kind of total failure. For everything to go dark simultaneously, either they had the worst luck in the galaxy, or someone really did not want that station operational. The Confederation has been having internal political troubles, I said slowly. There have been reports of separatist movements in the outer colonies. If this outpost was seen as loyal to the central government, then taking it offline would send a message, Kira finished. Wonderful. So we are flying into a potential terrorism situation to rescue people who may or may not want to be rescued, on a station that might have hostile actors still aboard. Is this the kind of situation humans call complicated? Mirren asked. This is what we call a Tuesday, Marcus said. Standard operating procedure, get in, save everyone we can, try not to die, deal with political fallout later. That is a terrible procedure, I objected. And yet it works more often than you would think. 14 hours later, we dropped out of high velocity and coasted toward the mining outpost. It hung in space like a dead thing, all lights extinguished, no heat signatures except for a few isolated pockets deep in the core sections where emergency shelters would be located. Life signs? Voldrin asked. Detecting 163 thermal signatures, Mirren reported. Concentrated in 3 separate locations. No movement. Atmosphere in those sections is marginal but survivable. 37 people unaccounted for, I said quietly. Marcus's jaw tightened. We focus on the ones we can save. Kira, what are we looking at in terms of station damage? She ran her scans, and her expression grew increasingly concerned. The reactor did not fail. It was shut down. Deliberately and expertly. Someone with serious technical knowledge cut power in a specific sequence designed to disable safety systems before they could activate backup protocols. This was professional work. Can we restore power? I asked. Not remotely. Someone will need to board the station and manually restart the reactor from the core control room. Which is here, she highlighted a section on the schematic, about 2 kilometers from the nearest emergency shelter. Through unpressurized sections with no gravity and no lights, Marcus added. So basically a nightmare scenario. Great. I volunteer to lead the boarding team, I said, surprising myself. Everyone turned to look at me. Kelthuris, Mirren said carefully, you are a xenobiologist, not a rescue specialist. Which is why I am bringing the humans with me, I replied. They seem to specialize in impossible situations. Marcus and Kira exchanged one of their looks. You know what? Marcus said. I was going to volunteer anyway, so this works out nicely. Kira. Already checking equipment manifests. We will need pressure suits, portable power units, and probably some weapons in case whoever shut down this station is still around. Weapons? I repeated weakly. Weapons, she confirmed. Because if someone is willing to kill 200 people to make a political point, they are definitely willing to kill a rescue team to prevent their plan from being undone. 2 hours later, I found myself floating through the darkened corridors of the mining outpost, following Marcus and Kira as they navigated by helmet lights and handheld scanners. The silence was oppressive, broken only by our breathing and the occasional creak of metal adjusting to temperature fluctuations. Life support must have failed gradually, Kira murmured. These corridors show signs of emergency protocols activating. Someone tried to contain the damage. Did not work obviously, Marcus said. But good effort. Kelthuris, how are you holding up? I am questioning every decision that led me to this moment, I replied honestly. That is the spirit. Existential crisis builds character. We reached an intersection, and Marcus held up a hand. His helmet light swept across something on the wall. Scratches. Recent ones. Someone came through here after the power failed, he said quietly. Moving fast, based on the pattern. Either fleeing something or chasing something. Comforting, I muttered. We pressed on, moving deeper into the station. The temperature dropped steadily as we moved away from the inhabited sections. My suit compensated, but I could feel the cold anyway, a psychological chill that had nothing to do with actual temperature. The reactor core control room was sealed behind a heavy blast door. Marcus examined the control panel, which was completely dead. Going to need to do this manually, he announced. Kira, help me with the emergency release. They worked together with practiced efficiency, and after several minutes of effort, the blast door groaned open. Inside, the control room was a mess. Panels had been pried open, wiring exposed, components removed entirely. They did not just shut down the reactor, Kira said, her voice tight. They sabotaged it. This is going to take hours to fix. Which we do not have, I said, checking my scanner. The emergency shelters are failing. Atmospheric pressure is dropping. Those people have maybe 3 hours left, for if they are lucky. Marcus was already moving, examining the damage with his helmet light. Okay. Okay, this is bad but not impossible. Kira, they pulled the primary control modules, but the secondary systems are intact. If we bypass the safety interlocks and route power directly through the backup conduits, we can restart the reactor in emergency mode. That will give us power but no regulation, Kira objected. If the reactor destabilizes, it could explode and take half the station with it. Then we will have to make sure it does not destabilize, Marcus replied. Kelthuris, can you monitor the reactor output while Kira and I rewire these systems? I am a xenobiologist, I reminded him. You are also brilliant and capable of learning quickly under pressure. Here is what you need to watch for. He quickly explained the monitoring protocols, and despite my protests, I found myself understanding the principles. Humans had a gift for making complex systems comprehensible. We worked in the darkness, our helmet lights crisscrossing as we moved through the damaged control room. Marcus and Kira rewired systems with confident precision, occasionally arguing about approach but always finding solutions. I monitored readings that climbed steadily as we coaxed the reactor back to life. Power at 20%, I reported. 30. 40. Life support is coming back online in the emergency sections, Miran's voice crackled through our communicators. Atmospheric pressure stabilizing. You did it. Not yet, Marcus grunted, connecting 2 power conduits. We still need to get the reactor stable and figure out who did this. The lights in the control room flickered to life. Gravity returned gradually, and we settled to the floor. And standing in the doorway, holding a weapon that I recognized as a Confederation military-grade plasma rifle, was a figure in a dark pressure suit. Well, the figure said, voice distorted by suit speakers, this is unfortunate. I was hoping everyone would just suffocate quietly. Marcus stood slowly, hands visible. Let me guess. Separatist movement. Political statement. Wanted to show that the Confederation cannot protect its own people. Something like that, the figure replied. And now I have to decide what to do about 3 witnesses who ruined my carefully planned disaster. Kira's hand drifted slowly toward her equipment belt. You know, for a carefully planned disaster, you made some rookie mistakes. Such as? You assumed no one would respond to the distress beacon fast enough to matter. You assumed the station was too far from help. You assumed no one would care enough to risk a rescue. She paused. You assumed wrong. I saw what she was doing. While she talked, Marcus was slowly positioning himself, and I realized with dawning horror that they were preparing to do something spectacularly dangerous and probably stupid. They were going to fight. Before I could object, Marcus moved. He grabbed a piece of debris and hurled it at the figure while simultaneously diving to the side. Kira triggered something on her belt, and a blinding flash filled the room. The figure fired, but the shot went wide, scorching the wall where Marcus had been standing. Then I did something I had never done before in my entire career as a xenobiologist. I picked up a tool and threw it as hard as I could at the attacker. My aim was terrible. The tool sailed past the figure's head by at least half a meter. But it distracted them for half a second, which was all Marcus needed. He closed the distance, grabbed the rifle, and in a move that seemed physically impossible, used the attacker's own momentum to flip them onto the ground. The rifle clattered away. Kira was already on the communicator. Captain Voldrin, we need security at reactor control immediately. We have one saboteur in custody and possibly more on the station. The figure on the ground stopped struggling and started laughing. You think you stopped anything? This station is finished. The Confederation is finished. Your precious rescue mission just delayed the inevitable. Maybe, Marcus said, keeping the figure pinned. But today, 163 people are going to keep breathing because we delayed the inevitable. I will take that victory. 6 hours later, I stood in the medical bay watching doctors treat survivors. Most would make full recoveries. Some had sustained injuries from the environmental failure, but they were alive. Captain Voldrin approached, looking exhausted but satisfied. The Confederation has sent their formal thanks. Very formal. Very diplomatic. Very confused about why a Veranthi science vessel responded when their own military did not. Politics, I said wearily. Indeed. They are also very interested in how we managed to arrive so quickly and how we managed to restart a sabotaged reactor in under 3 hours. He looked at me meaningfully. I informed them that we had exceptional consultants. Marcus and Kira were sitting nearby, both looking more tired than I had ever seen them. Threxen had somehow managed to prepare a fresh batch of his pastries, which the humans were consuming with single-minded determination. You saved a lot of lives today, I told them. We helped, Marcus corrected. You saved them too, Kelthuris. That throw was terrible by the way. I am a xenobiologist, I said for what felt like the 1000th time. You are also apparently a rescue specialist now, Kira said. Nice work. I sat down beside them, accepting a pastry from Threxen, who clicked happily and wandered off to find more people to feed. Your species is exhausting, I told the humans. You have mentioned that, Marcus replied. You break things constantly. Also mentioned. You ignore protocols, override security, and make everyone around you question their career choices. Hey now, that last one is just good management strategy, Kira protested. I took a bite of the pastry. It was extraordinary. But you also fix things that we thought were unfixable. You see solutions where we see only problems. You risk everything to save people you have never met because you think it is the right thing to do. They looked at each other, then back at me. Are you having a moment? Marcus asked. I believe I am having what you call a moment, yes. Do you want a hug? Humans hug during moments. Absolutely not. I have my dignity. But I stayed sitting with them, eating pastries in the medical bay, watching people recover who should have died. And I thought about how the Concordance would react when I submitted my report about everything that had happened. They would probably demote me. They would definitely have questions. They might even recall me from this assignment. But 163 people were alive who would have been dead. Our ship could now fly faster and more efficiently than ever before. Systems we had simply accepted as problematic were now optimized beyond original specifications. Acceptable parameters were no longer acceptable. Humans had taught me that. So, Kira said eventually, about those quantum stabilizers we were fixing before all this happened. I groaned. Please tell me you did not leave them disassembled. Oh no, we finished them remotely while we were flying here. They are running at 112% efficiency now. That is impossible. Was impossible, Marcus corrected with a grin. And despite everything, despite my exhaustion and stress and the career complications that awaited me, I found myself laughing. Because sometimes the universe gives you humans, and you either adapt or get left behind. I chose to adapt. The Concordance could deal with it.